We're going to be having a look at some of the graphics in a moment, but first and foremost we want to talk about Freddie's Adventures, because that started. Now, what was the inspiration behind writing a children's book in the first place?
Well, it was the events that happened. We had the allotments, we had in Cosham, we had this particular fox who was magical.
Yes.
His relationship with people was extraordinary. And the antics he got up to and the games he played just made the pillars of stories. And, you know, as each one happened and I witnessed or fellow allotment gardener told me about them, I could see the story and a title sort of emerge.
Right.
So it was really built around happenings, that were, you know, magical events, and thinking to myself, now these events really ought to be relayed on, because they are so interesting that I want other people to know about them. I want children to actually enjoy them.
Yes. Before we talk about his adventures, we did touch briefly on the difference between e-books and actual books, and you firmly believe that for children particularly, they need to hold
owning a book.
Yes.
Owning a book is so important, I think, for children. And of course with illustrations you need to have a book anyway.
You do. Now, we've got Freddie's Adventures, and that started this off, and then we've got some illustrations now, because we've got Takes Up Gardening, which is quite apropos because of course of the allotment. So what was the particular antic that Freddie got up to that inspired this?
Well, there were three.
Right.
First of all, there was one particular day when I was spreading some manure on my garden, and got a bit tired.
Hope it wasn't pig's manure.
No.
Really smells.
No. So I put the fork in the ground
Yes.
after digging it in, went over to talk to my friend, and as I was talking to my friend, Freddie walked up and started to pull at my gardening fork.
Right.
And with his teeth, and my friend Roger said, Freddie's trying to do some gardening, jokingly.
Yes.
So I thought, oh, idea. And then a few days later, there was another friend put a hand fork down on the ground, and within minutes that had gone.
Right.
And I was then gardening another day, and had my packet of seeds behind me on the grass path, and I was conscious of something, you know, not being alone.
No.
And I looked around.
Don't look behind you.
I looked around, and there he was, just about to pick a packet of carrot seeds out of the back of my seed box.
Right.
So I thought, now I've got the planks of a story.
You have indeed.
So that's how it developed.
Right. And then we have the apple harvest, which comes then. These aren't necessarily in the order, but the apple harvest. So where did you get what's happened to sort of inspire that?
Well, the apple harvest was me.
Yes.
I was up the tree, and I was picking a bumper harvest. The previous year I'd only had 15 apples on the tree, and there were hundreds on this particular year. And I suddenly was conscious that Freddie had arrived, and he used to sit down in front of everyone and watch them do their work. And his coat used to shine. He looked so healthy. He was brilliant. And he dived underneath a carpet, which is what they tend to do because they hear the mice. And he got a piece of cling film wrapped around his nose, and he was in a lot of distress, coughing and spluttering.
Yes.
And he actually allowed me to come down from my ladder and unwind it.
Right.
And that was, you know, I thought, you know, another magical event.
Yes.
And you wouldn't find it probably with 1 in a million foxes.
No.
But anyway, I would then climb back up my tree, and I filled the basket at the bottom, and I put that to one side and got a box out to fill some more. And then I noticed when I was up on the top of the tree that Freddie was taking the nice plump apples off the top of my basket. He was taking them down. He was taking them down the path and making his own collection. So that again started the theme of a story.
Yes.
And so, you know, every one of the 6 books is actually built around things that happened.
Yes. That's actually quite typical behaviour. I remember I had a rough collie before my last one called Sasha, and I painstakingly laid out our back garden with all the colours and where I wanted to put all the bulbs, laid it all out, let her watch. Big mistake. I went in to make a cup of tea and I came back out and she dug every single one up and was laying on the top of them. And I was hopeless in the garden. I couldn't tell you what was what. So I ended up putting them all back, higgledy-piggledy, and I must say the result was delightful.
Yep.
So instead of this nicely planned garden...
You have a cottage garden?
Yes, I have a cottage garden. We've got the wicked rats and the horrid thieves. Now, how did that one come about?
Well, that one came about because another friend, gardening friend, Cyril, in the previous year had lost all his potatoes because they'd been eaten by the rats whilst they were growing in the ground.
Okay.
And then the foxes came, and they are very good for us because they keep the rats down.
Yes.
And of course, Cyril had no problems the following year. So that was the beginning of one story, of that particular story. And then in that particular part of